What's up, you guys? Today I'm going to be attempting to make Gordon Ramsay's viral vegan eggplant steak. I've been super curious about this recipe since I first saw it on TikTok last year, and I've been wanting to try it out, so I figured why not take you guys along for the journey. If you're new here, or if you don't watch my Instagram stories, which is where I post the majority of my food content, I eat a plant-based diet. I am coming up on, I believe, the 15-year mark in the next couple months. I've lost track, but I'm pretty sure we're nearing that milestone. For me personally, that means I am a vegetarian technically, but I eat closer to a vegan diet. I cook vegan food at home. I always feel the need to clarify that because I don't want to confuse or mislead anyone into thinking I'm like full on vegan. Cooking and baking are a huge passion of mine. And while I am pretty confident in my culinary abilities, I am nervous to make this recipe because that looks like a steak. And I'm afraid that my eggplant steaks are going to come out looking like blobfish. Like, I'm having visions of like a sad, wet, mushy, pink tinged eggplant. I'm really hoping that's not how it turns out though. Subscribe down below if you are new. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy it or find it entertaining. Go follow me on Twitter and Instagram. They're always linked down below, but I'm at SariReanna on both. But let's go ahead and get right into it. So this meal has a ton of elements. I printed out the recipe and I have it in front of me for Gordon Ramsay's vegan steakhouse dinner, but I'll link the written recipe and the TikTok down below. But I decided I'm going to be making all of the components except for the charred vegetable demi-glace because it's just a lot and I feel like we're really here for the eggplant, but I am going to be making the mash and the red wine steakhouse mushrooms too. So because this recipe has so many components, I went ahead and I prepped a few things ahead of time. So I already roasted some garlic, I made some fresh beet juice as well, and I also prepared the rub for the eggplant steaks. So one of the first steps of the recipe is to toast your spices and grind them. I could not find all of the spices in their seed form, or when I did, they were only available in like 2.5 pound bags, which would just be an absolute waste for me. So I kind of had to cobble this together a little bit, but I do have all of the main components except for the mushroom powder. I wasn't able to find that, so it's going to be lacking a little bit of umami flavor, I guess, but I think I got close enough. So our first step is going to be to char the eggplants. I do not have a gas stove, so I am going to be doing this in the oven under broil. You just want to get like a nice blackened char on the skin, so I'm gonna do that really quick. So while we wait for that, I'm going to start prepping some of my other ingredients. I'm gonna peel my potatoes and chop them up for the mash. I know I'm using a carrot peeler to do this, and someone out there is probably cringing. I have a potato peeler, but I just don't like it as much. Honestly, whenever I'm making anything with like potato or sweet potato, it needs to be peeled. I usually get James to do it because I just hate it. I know I don't do it in a very efficient way, but this is just what works for me, okay? Okay, I checked on the eggplant and I think they're doing pretty good. I'm just going to go ahead and start chopping the potatoes as well. I'm going to chop them pretty small just to speed up the whole boiling and mashing process. Okay, so I'm just going to add these to the pot that I'm going to be boiling them in, and I'm just going to cover them with cold water until I'm ready to make them. Okay, so we've got our charred eggplants here. I did put slits in them, but the skin on this one kind of popped open, but that's fine because the purpose of this is to be able to peel off the skin anyways. But the next step is to move them into a baking dish and tightly cover the dish with plastic wrap until they are cool enough to handle. Once again, the purpose of this is just to basically steam them so the skin is going to easily peel off. All right, so while we let these little babies rest and cool off, I'm going to quickly go ahead and prep the mushrooms as well. So the recipe calls for trumpet mushrooms, but it also says you can substitute oyster mushrooms, which I have under here, and then there are shiitake mushrooms on top. I've only ever used oyster mushrooms to make oyster mushroom wings, so I'm like kind of debating like how much to cut off of them because I feel like the prep is very different. And in the recipe, if you're using trumpet mushrooms, it says to like place them cut side down and cook them separately before the shiitake mushrooms, but I think with these I'm just gonna have to fry them all together. So I'm just gonna cut the oyster mushrooms into like bite-sized pieces like it says to do with the shiitake mushrooms and hope for the best. I'm just trying to take out like the woodier stem pieces and do like a rough chop since they're going to be like cooked in a red wine reduction, so I feel like they don't need to be perfect. All right, so I went ahead and I peeled the skins off the eggplants. I probably could have waited a little bit longer to get the skin to peel off a bit easier, but I got a little impatient and they were cool enough to touch, so I figured it was fine. I'm trying to get the recipe as accurate and close to the original as possible, but I also don't want to spend 7 hours making this, you know? And they are just like nice and lightly tender like the recipe says. So the next step, it says to cover the eggplants in the rub and sea salt. So I'm just gonna go for it. I'm gonna start sprinkling that on and pressing it in. Not do the best job grinding these up. Like I said, I had to kind of improvise a little bit, and also I feel like my rub looks so different than Gordon's does in the video. Like, it calls for 2 tablespoons of smoked paprika, so why isn't his red like mine is? Okay, I feel like they are pretty well coated. Now it says to just drizzle with a little bit of oil, and then to take your dry red wine and just lightly pour over the eggplant until there is enough to cover the bottom of the baking dish. I'm sure you know this $10 Canadian Cab Sav is the exact same red wine Gordon Ramsay uses. It's actually not bad. I'm sure Gordon Ramsay would call it piss, but... And then these babies are going into the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. So it says to roast them for 30 to 45 minutes, turning them once carefully in the middle of the process. And then I think this is a typo. It says reason and roast. I'm guessing it means re-season and roast for another 30 minutes. But don't worry, we've got other things to do in the meantime. Now that those are in the oven, we're going to head back over to the stovetop and start preparing the basting jus. So we're going to add 2 cups of red wine to our pan. Then we're also going to do 1 cup of our beet juice and 2 sprigs of rosemary, and it says to bring this to a rapid boil. Okay, so now that we've hit our rapid boil, we are just going to lower the heat and let this mixture reduce. So while we're waiting on the basting jus, I just wanted to chat with you for a moment. So obviously, I think it is great that Gordon Ramsay is introducing some vegan cooking onto his platforms and his website and everything. And obviously he is like a highly accredited gourmet chef, so this kind of recipe definitely makes sense for him to put out. But I would love to see more like high profile celebrity chefs and people with these huge platforms showing simple vegan cooking, because plant-based cooking already has this stereotype of being really expensive and really complicated, really time consuming, and this recipe definitely does fit that stereotype. It'd be great to see people with huge platforms showing that it can also be really simple and really satisfying, and you don't need to go to these huge lengths to make a meal like this. Because I know from first-hand experience that there are people who will see this recipe and think like, oh my god, like being vegan is way too much work, like I could never cook this, why not just like continue throwing a steak on the grill, it's so much more simple. I'm personally making this recipe as someone who loves cooking. I love a challenge in the kitchen, I love learning new techniques, but I can pretty confidently say that unless the flavor of this absolutely blows me away, this probably isn't something I will make again, because it is a lot of work. And this definitely isn't the type of cooking I do on a regular basis as someone who does eat a plant-based diet. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Yeah, I just thought that was worth mentioning. If this is like your first introduction to plant-based cooking, there's definitely a lot of way easier and cheaper recipes out there. Okay, so now that this liquid has reduced significantly, we are going to add the bouillon and the plant-based butter. So about a tablespoon of bouillon and half a cup of vegan butter. We're just going to go ahead and whisk that in, let the butter melt. I'm using the Better Than Beyond brand, just the seasoned vegetable flavor. I know that this brand also has a chickenless chicken bouillon. I'm not sure if they have a beefless bouillon, but I feel like that would probably be an even better fit if you could find that. And I'm using this President's Choice plant-based butter alternative, which I've never tried before, but seems pretty good so far. Okay, so now that those ingredients are fully incorporated, we're gonna turn off the heat. And I'm just adding a 1/4 cup of soy sauce and about a tablespoon of vegan Worcestershire sauce. I'm just using the Wizards brand. That's the only one I've ever seen. So the eggplants have been roasting for about an hour total now, and I finished the jus just in time for the next step, and they're looking pretty good, I must say. I am feeling a bit more confident now that we're this far into the recipe. So you have to drop the heat down to 300 degrees first of all. So the next step is to just drizzle some of the jus over the eggplants. and then it is going to go back in the oven with the reduced heat. It says to roast for another 15 to 20 minutes, and then continue to roast the eggplant, basting periodically until the eggplants appear slightly dehydrated and start to resemble steak. So I'm going to continue roasting and basting these. I'm just going to show this process once so it is not totally repetitive. So let's just go ahead and pop those back in the oven. Now that we are finally in the home stretch, I think it's time to start preparing our sides. So I'm gonna start with the garlic mash. Vegan or plant-based mashed potatoes are extremely easy to make. You can pretty much just follow your usual steps, but then you just substitute plant-based butter and plant-based milk or cream. Obviously, this is going to be a little bit fancier since it is a Gordon Ramsay recipe. But to start off, I rinsed off our diced potatoes and I added fresh water, and I'm just bringing them to a boil on this stove top. I'm going to add some salt once they start boiling and just boil them until they are fork tender. And in this recipe, you mix together your cream and butter and everything and heat it in a small saucepan. So I've already got the butter in my little saucepan here. I'm gonna squeeze in a couple cloves of our roasted garlic. I'm just gonna kind of smash those a little bit more now that they're in the pan. And I'm adding 1/3 of a cup of plant-based milk. This is just unsweetened oat milk. We're gonna let the butter melt and let it simmer and let all that roasted garlic flavor infuse into the mixture. Okay, so the mashed potatoes are done. I ended up adding a little bit more oat milk because I wanted them to be creamy, but I've just got them sitting on the back here to stay warm. And we're going to start on the mushrooms. I transferred the rest of the basting jus to a measuring cup because I didn't want to get another pan dirty, but we're just gonna add a little bit of oil, add our mushrooms, and just start getting a bit of a sear and caramelization on them. So these have cooked down, most of the water has evaporated. We're going to add the butter, and then I'm going to add our minced garlic and shallots. It says to season generously with black pepper. The next step after that is to deglaze the pan with more red wine. And we're also adding some mushroom stock, and then we're going to let that reduce. You're also supposed to add fresh thyme to the mushrooms, but I couldn't find any. Okay, I think these have definitely been cooking long enough that we can finish them off now. So we're gonna add more butter, just a little splash of Worcestershire sauce, and I'm just gonna add a little bit more salt and pepper here in a second once this is all melted. And then I think we are ready to plate, you guys. Okay, so let's go ahead and plate this up. I've already got my mashed potatoes on the plate. Going to go ahead and add some mushrooms on top. Carefully lift out our eggplant steak. I am pretty freaking stoked right now. I feel like this turned out so good. I kind of poked the top of it there so you can kind of see like the very obviously eggplant innards poking through, but like generally, this looks like a steak, I think. Okay, let's do a taste. I think I'm gonna get just a bite of the eggplant first, and then I'm gonna try it all together. It's pretty bomb. It's definitely delicious. The basting jus tastes incredible, but like it still has kind of like the same shreddy texture of eggplant. I wonder if I cooked it longer and like continued to dehydrate it, if that would help. Incredible taste. I would definitely be thrilled if I like went to a steakhouse and this was the vegan option on the menu. It's definitely not a dish you could serve to someone who actually eats steak and like trick them into thinking it's real steak. Not that anyone ever said that's the purpose of this recipe, which speaking of, I feel like we need to get someone else's opinion. Okay, so I figured we needed the opinion of someone who actually eats steak. So I brought James in to do a taste test. So I plated James's eggplant steak as well. The only difference is his doesn't have the mushrooms because he doesn't like mushrooms. But go ahead and try it out.
Here we go.
Yeah.
It's really tasty. It tastes quite a bit like a steak.
Like the flavoring is pretty accurate.
Yeah, like it has the charbroiled taste. It has like that umami taste. The texture is like, it's quite soft.
Yeah, it's still eggplant is like what I said. Yeah. I was like, on the inside it still has the texture and like the kind of like wetness, for lack of a better word, of eggplant. Like I said, like it would never fool anyone into thinking it's steak, but yeah. I think it tastes really good. You satisfied with this for dinner?
Yeah.
We're struggling with the height difference here because I need to be in frame, but James has to crouch a lot. My question I want to ask before we wrap things up, do you think this was worth like 3 hours of time to make? Is it that good?
I don't think very many meals are worth 3 hours of time.
That's fair.
If I'm being honest.
That's fair.
It's very yummy though.
Earlier on in the video, I said that unless it like blows me away, it's probably not something I would make again. And like, I think I stand by that. Like, I'm definitely happy I tried it, but it's not gonna be in our even semi-regular meal rotation. I wanted to like really impress someone.
Yeah.
Like wow someone.
Yeah.
Maybe I would make it.
Like, it's really yummy. It's really good. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I guess that's where I'm going to wrap up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed coming along on this cooking journey with me. Hope you found it entertaining and interesting. Make sure you give it a thumbs up if you did, and go follow me on social media. I'm at SariReanna on Twitter and Instagram. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I post a lot of plant-based food content on my Instagram, and I have 2 highlights on my profile if you want some inspiration or you just want to see how delicious a plant-based diet can be. And subscribe down below if you are new, but we're gonna go ahead and go eat our eggplant steaks for dinner. I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye guys.